Hello everyone, welcome to the Wilkinson Butler Quick Take podcast. I'm Liam Cox, joined by Peter Wilkinson. Today we're going to discuss what to do when a journalist calls, and we're going to give you some really practical advice. And we're going to set up a little scenario. For instance, you're a CEO of a really well-respected company and somebody on your board has been accused of sex abuse, a really serious case. Peter, the last thing you need during a crisis like this is to have a journalist call.
That's right. So if a company is trying to resolve this as quietly as possible. There's the terrible circumstance for the person who's been potentially abused. There's the terrible circumstance for the person who has been accused potentially. And there are the families around those people. And then there's your first concern your concern after that is for your staff. So a journalist can really mess up your day. So when you get the call, the first thing when you get the call is, this is going to really stuff my day. So the best thing to do is get off the phone. Liam, I'm really happy to talk to you. Can I call you back in a few minutes? Is that okay? Is that okay puts the onus on you to say yes or no, and you know what you're going to almost certainly say.
The journalist will always give you that opportunity.
Yeah, might say how long, but yeah. Then you can go away, you can Google, check out the journalist, go and talk to some other people, discuss how you're going to approach this phone call, and ring back, and you're on the front foot, you're on the offensive, you're asking the questions, you're in control of the conversation. Hi Liam, happy to talk, how can I help?
And you have a better understanding of who you're talking to as well,
Yep.
What company they're from, what program they're from, if they're aggressive, if they're fair-minded, if they're going to stitch you up, and then you know where you sit.
Totally. Then the difficulty a lot of people have is they don't actually appreciate you can ask journalists penetrating questions at this stage. And don't be afraid to. The next problem people have is they don't exactly know what questions to ask. And so there are only 7 questions you need to ask to understand how the story is likely to look, plus, can I trust the journalist? The first question obviously is, what's the story? Just in case. The story in this case, what would you say?
Sex abuse.
It's about sex abuse with a board director. Okay, we understand that. The second is, what's the angle? Now, I've got every right as the person on the company end of this to say, is the story going to be, are we going to get a fair run? Now, a journalist is always going to say yes to that, but you can dive into that. Are we going to get equal space? Are we going to be, is our side of the story going to be fairly put? What's the headline going to be? Is there a picture? What's the picture going to be? All of these things help inform you of the angle. If it's going to be a train wreck for us, or whether it's going to be fairly evenly handled in a situation like this. In stories like this, any story over a minute is certainly going to have a victim and a villain, excuse the cliche, but possibly an expert as well, okay? So the third question is, who else is speaking and what are they saying? And that really guides you on the nature of the story, because if there's an expert, so clearly you want to know if the alleged is going to speak. If he or she isn't, that weighs into your decisions about whether or not you should do this interview. Is there an expert, and what is that person going to say? Is the expert kind of an industry expert, fairly even-handed, or is it a radical from the Me Too movement? All of these things will inform you about how fair, good or bad the story is going to be.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? If there's going to be 3 people as opposed to your view, it gives you an idea of if the story will be fair and balanced.
These are building blocks. These are building blocks to help you understand what the story is going to look like. The next one is, what are the questions from me? Areas of questions. What are the issues that I'm going to be addressing? Almost certainly it's going to be the sex abuse the alleged sex abuse by this board director, but there may be other areas of, if it's a bigger story, there may be other areas that the journalist is going to go into, about other allegations of bullying, something else in the company's history that you don't that you're not aware of. You need to understand that. And you're entitled to say, so do we have an agreement there's no surprise questions? And if you're uncertain, get it in writing. And you can say things like, if in the process of your research you discover more, can you let me know before the interview? Give me the questions, I can prepare good answers for you.
And so you're ensuring that you're not going to get stitched up.
If you believe, if you don't trust the journalist, if there's not a degree of transparency and you're wavering on doing the interview, you are less likely to do it if the journalist is withholding or is being dishonest with you than if the journalist is being open and transparent with you.
Absolutely.
That's just the nature of relationships these days.
And if the journalist is fair and balanced, they will be open with you and give you the questions and the line of questioning and where you want to go. If they're a good journalist.
It's very old. So different publications, by the way, are interestingly different on this. The ABC is less inclined to give you this information. I think it's silly. It's a cultural thing. Funnily enough, the Daily Telly is the most open. I don't know why, but the Daily Telly sort of tends to give you all the bad news in the preparation because they're going to get you anyway, I guess. That's their assumption. Then there's three final questions. When's the interview? When's publication? And how big is it? How big is the story? If it's that big in a newspaper story, say 600 words, you're going to get 500 to 600 words. You're going to get room for max 2, possibly 3 quotes, 7 to 10 seconds each. 7 is 21 to 30 words, 3 words a second. So you've got very limited space. Then there's 2 other areas you need to think about. One is kill a fact. Journalists love facts, and they will get facts from somewhere else if you can't give them facts. So in this case, it could be we have, hopefully, no history of sex abuse in this company, or there may be some other history that you need to manage. And the second, there may be a code. I would hope the board has a code of conduct or a charter or something to work with, and that may be something that you can refer to the journalist. They're 2 solid bits of information. And the other one is bear traps. What else in the company's history that may be relevant to this story that the journalist may know about that you should prepare for, just in case the journalist does spring you with some surprises.
And these 7 questions, they all lead you to the question of, am I better off doing this story or not? That's what it all revolves around, isn't it?
Yep. The decision you've got to make based on what you understand of the story and the trust you have in the journalist is, am I better off in or out of this story?
Peter, thank you. Some really practical advice, 7 questions to ask when a journalist calls.